What's going on, guys? So you may look at this picture and you may notice or recognize this individual, or should we say individuals. I want to talk a little bit about facial recognition, how flawed it is, and how it may have been used in this case, and how it may be covered up if it were used. Now, some of this is going to be hypothetical, but then there's also going to be some analysis on another story to dispel some of the conspiracy theories that are going around out there. So for this particular story, which we know what happened in Manhattan earlier in last month, where an individual did something on a Manhattan street and targeted someone. Now, this is the individual in that particular video clip that took that action, which I do not support, for the record, but I do want to note that as someone who is an artist, who is an illustrator, who has worked with perspective many thousands of hours, I can tell you that this guy, the person in question that carried out that action, that was caught on the video with this gray book bag, this individual does not appear to be the same as the other photos. Now, this is the person that we know carried out said action, but this is someone who was found at a hostel on video surveillance. Now, it's pretty obvious to me, in my opinion, now this is my opinion, that facial recognition was used. And I'm going to talk about some of the flaws of that today and how I personally believe this is an entirely different person. Now, what does that mean if it were a different person? Does that mean that the individual that was arrested was innocent? No, it doesn't mean that necessarily, but what it could mean, and this person is obviously innocent until proven guilty. I truly believe that. Now, this particular person who carried out the action, you can see various differences. And as someone who has an eye for detail, who has worked with various perspective, I can look at a nose straight on and I can tell you what it'll look like at a different angle. This is a different nose. This is not the same nose whatsoever. I don't care what angle you have it at. It's just not the same nose. The skin tone also looks different. Now, of course, there could be some work on the imagery to change the tone of the skin tone, but it really looks like an entirely different individual. Obviously, the eyebrows are very different on this one and this one, and if they're recorded at the same time, how can you tell me this is the same person? Even so, if they're using facial recognition, you have a very small amount of biometric data to work with here. This is not a full facial recognition, something that could be relied upon in court, in my opinion. And it does not look at all like this individual. I can even see how this could be two different people. I mean, if you doubt that, just take a look at this. So many people have what are known as doppelgangers, which are lookalikes. So many people go and travel to New York City, and it's not an unpopular destination. So it would not be surprising if the person arrested just happened to be in New York City at that particular time period, especially since they aren't too many states away. And the fact is, this guy did not trim his eyebrows. I do not believe, that's one other possibility, of course, is that he could have trimmed his eyebrows. But even so, you can't fake that nose and that nose. This is a more bulbous nose. This is definitely a much thinner bridge nose, and the eyes are completely different. You may not be able to tell, but as someone who has done thousands of hours of illustration, I can tell you this really, in my honest opinion, is not the same person as this, and is not the same person as this, the arrested individual right here. Now, this all comes down to the flaws in facial recognition, and if that were in fact used. What's interesting is McDonald's had been experimenting with things like facial recognition and artificial intelligence at their locations. So is it possible that maybe they were actually using facial recognition to pick this up? And not only that, but this individual who was arrested happened to have some medical information on their back injury and a surgery. Now, another interesting factor in that surgery, I saw a video from a guy named Gooby on YouTube who happened to be a spinal surgeon in the past. And he ended up quitting his job as he saw a lot of things wrong with the ways they were asked to handle these kinds of back problems. So he said that body scan, that spinal scan showing the afterwork of the surgery. He said they had done it wrong and he wasn't surprised that he was in pain. Not only that, we know that mass surveillance, all of these things, our content, our entire public internet interface is being scanned and cataloged at all times using artificial intelligence. Is it possible they came up with a suspect list that went through and looked for people who had medical injuries and also could have matched up with that facial recognition at that time? I think there's a real possibility here. I really do. And we know that facial recognition has had countless arrests that were wrongful arrests, all based on flawed facial recognition. Now, when they're using this and they have flaws in the facial recognition, when you have less to work with, such as this, you have very little biometric data to work with on this one. Now, this one, I even question if this is the same exact person. There's a possibility that it's not. This one definitely, I would bet money on, is not the same person, unless he's using some type of advanced mask that actually has that realism look. And there are things out there like that. But was it used in this case? I'm not sure. They did say they found a mask, but I question some of that evidence as well, in that they said they did not find, according to the police reports that are going around social media, they said they did not even find the weapon until they got to the police station. To me, that strikes me as a bit odd. Normally, police officers, if they are to search an individual, they will do so for their safety and try and find any potential weapons on the scene. It's very odd to me that they did not find it until they were at the police station. To me, that really adds a little bit of concern that there is a possibility of evidence that may have possibly been even planted, possibly, but I'm not suggesting that's the case. I'm just saying it doesn't look good when this individual, who just does not appear to be the person who carried out the action, this person right here, it's very odd to me they did not find the evidence until they got to the police station. Now, of course, they found fake IDs, according to the report, at the McDonald's, but how many people have fake IDs? Tons of people, especially if you're in New York City where you can get them right on Canal Street. I mean, come on. The fake ID is not the evidence. And I also find it odd that there was a so-called manifesto on him at the time. Now, I'm not saying that they planted anything on him. I really wouldn't know. But I think it always looks worse when you have, the chain of custody is compromised in a way in that not everything was on camera. They didn't, when they arrested him at the McDonald's, they did not actually pull out the weapon at that McDonald's. According to police reports, they didn't find it until they got back to the police station. There's also some oddities as well, such as this book bag is nothing like this one. Not only that, but this jacket is completely different. As you can see, the pockets right here, completely different jackets. Now, with facial recognition and the flaws in it, it may have said this is the closest match they had at the time on scene. So it's possible, in my opinion, that they maybe went with whatever was the closest matches if it was facial recognition. And you may say, well, why haven't we heard anything about facial recognition if it were in fact used? Well, it's being used, and in fact, a lot of businesses are allowing police to tap into their surveillance footage, and from there they can use something like Clearview AI, take all of the social media photos, take all of the medical complaints, which is not a surprise because over 60,000 Americans die every year just because they were denied health care by their insurance companies. So there's tons of outrage right now. There's a lot of sympathy for the arrested individual, the suspect, who is innocent until proven guilty, but I do question if flawed technology was used. Now, how would that be covered up? How would that be hidden from the public? Well, there's something that's called parallel construction. Now, parallel construction is where law enforcement uses an unethical practice. In my opinion, it is a very unethical practice, and it's used to cover up the illegal use of surveillance. So if there is law breaking in surveillance, they will use something called parallel construction. So if, for instance, the three-letter agency of choice fill in that there, happens to share some intelligence with law enforcement, which they commonly do, and use parallel construction to cover that up. Now, parallel construction means they hide the actual surveillance part. They do this in order to prevent a case being thrown out in court due to illegal practices. Now, what they'll end up doing is they'll use some of the information in that surveillance to then try and recreate a trail of evidence. Now, there are whistleblowers out there who actually call this planned perjury, and it seriously does undermine the justice system and is a very dangerous practice, in my opinion, because it sort of encourages illegal practices. I mean, not sort of. That's exactly what it does. And a lot of it comes down to the war on drugs. And you've heard me talk about this. I am against it because I do believe that when you fight an unwinnable war that just happens to set court precedents, over 85% of court precedents are in the war on drugs. Now, you may think, I don't use drugs. This doesn't affect me. Well, guess what? It does. Because every single one of those court precedents actually infringes upon your rights. So when you're pulled over at a traffic stop, your rights are lost because of some old drug case court precedent. So the way law enforcement must behave is based on the court precedents and rulings by whatever court it may be in that district. And so if a search is deemed legal under circumstances that otherwise would not be legal, that means that you lose that Fourth Amendment right that you may have had before the war on drugs. And there are countless of these cases. 85% or more of our infringement upon and our erosion of our constitutional rights comes from the war on drug cases. All of these court precedents really do matter. And so even if you think a war on drugs is a good thing, and I used to believe in it, not gonna lie, I used to think this was the way forward, but now I see it for what it is. It's an unwinnable war that is going to do nothing but erode our rights until we have nothing left, because it is an unwinnable war. Now, to the next story, I want to talk about the story that happened outside of the Trump building. So we know there was a Cybertruck and it kind of blew up, and I thought originally, I said, oh, that must have been one of those lithium explosions on the battery. Well, in this case, it seems that the individual in question, Matthew Livelsberger, actually had put fireworks in the truck and all of these other, explosive targets that are used for, training and target practice, and basically kind of put some IED together in that way, and then offed himself and whatnot, and kind of blew the whole thing up. Well, the thing about this case that there's a lot of rumors going around on, and I wanted to dispel those today, is what we see is a lot of people are saying that the signal number has changed. And this is actually being reported by those who actually knew him. And I want to talk about how this could come to be. So your safety number on Signal, as you can see, this person's reporting it, and I'm seeing tons of videos and content, and no one seems to know why the Signal safety number changed, but I have my own theory, and I'm going to share that with you. So what the Signal safety number is, it's sort of like the fingerprint. So when you connect to an SSH connection, it asks it, do you want to accept this fingerprint? If you look at the browser and the site certificate, you can see the fingerprint inside that information. So if you go into security, you can view the certificate and you can see the fingerprints. This is one of the most important subjects. So if you're not familiar with fingerprints, this is one of the most important subjects on encryption, because if you're not verifying the fingerprint, be it PGP or anything else, including HTTPS, you may be under a man-in-the-middle attack. So one thing, and I've covered this in the past, that you can actually find the fingerprint from online, and then you can match that up and make sure it's in your browser. Otherwise, you're in a man-in-the-middle attack if it's not matching, potentially. Now, another technique that I've offered in the past is using a separate network. If you're able to see the same fingerprint across multiple different connection networks and IP addresses, that means that you're not under a man-in-the-middle attack. Now, the same goes for HTTPS, the same goes for Signal and their safety numbers. Now, if the safety number changed, that means the encryption has changed. The keys have changed. So what that means is if someone's undergoing a man-in-the-middle attack, someone's going to try and push a malicious key that's under the control of this attacker. Now, if that safety number changes, well, that means that someone's probably trying to get you to accept a new safety number. Now, if you ever see safety number change, you're going to want to definitely talk to that person in person. You can actually scan the QR code and ensure that your safety numbers are matching up. And that is the way you can ensure that on Signal that you have secure encryption. But in this particular case, there's a lot of people saying that he faked his death or that this is a secret government operation. Well, I don't believe that. I think this was a legitimate person that was dealing with mental health issues. And so, I'm not out here to blame government or the police or anyone else. I'm just out here to dispel some of these rumors because, as you can see, the safety number has changed. That's interesting, isn't it? Because this happened after he was already passed on. So how would that happen? Why would that happen? Let's talk a little bit about that and what could be happening here. And it may also lead over to parallel construction again. So let's go ahead and get into it. So it seems that no one knew why the safety number was changing. Well, my opinion, and the reason I think this is because they're investigating right now this case, even though he's passed on. So of course he's not going to have to stand trial because he's not around to stand trial. I don't think he faked his death. I think he just was dealing with some issues mentally, and sometimes bad things happen. So the fact is, if they wanted to get into his phone, it was likely encrypted. So what would law enforcement do? Well, law enforcement can't get into his old Signal messages. So what would they do? They might tend to clone his number, set it up on a new device because the original device is encrypted, so they can't get through that. So what they could do to gather information on potential partners in this crime or potential inspiration, potential connections to this crime, if they want to get into the Signal contacts, they would need to first set it up on another phone. And by doing that, it would automatically change the Signal safety numbers. And that's what I believe happened in this case. I think this is likely what's happening, and they may not reveal it because there are things like parallel construction that allow you to kind of cover up the illegal surveillance parts. Now, I don't think this is a bad use. I'm not saying this is a bad thing that they're doing this. Obviously, the guy has passed on, and I am not against them doing their investigation into this and finding out if somebody had worked with him, because I think, it's not like it's violating his rights because he's already gone. Because he's passed on, it's not really a violation of his rights. But it is tricky. And so, obviously, I do not support any form of surveillance. I do not even support surveillance in general. I don't support illegal surveillance especially. But in this particular case is unique in that he has passed on and they're trying to find connections to him, in my opinion. Like I said, this is just my opinion, but that dispels all of the conspiracy theories going around that he supposedly faked his death or that this was a government black op or something like that. So there's tons of conspiracy theories out there, and just wanted to kind of dispel that rumor because, in my opinion, that's exactly what it is. As I reported here, my theory, they cloned his number, couldn't access the old message contents due to the encryption on his phone. Therefore, they would set up a second Signal device with his phone number in order to see if any of his contacts sent a message, in order to try and collect those contacts on Signal, in order to get some leads into potential people that may have been working with him. And this may not be true, but he certainly isn't doing it after death. So I think this is the most likely reason for the Signal safety number change. Now let's go and talk a little bit. One last thing I want to talk about is the censorship going on Twitter. Now, if you have been following my channel, you'll know that I have been talking about the problems that have happened since the purchase of Twitter. How it's now called X, but what they've done is they've blocked Knitter. So they block third-party searches, and what that does is it prevents anyone from getting an unbiased search result. And what that means is they can do something called heaven banning, where they can actually make entire artificial environments, artificial friends, AI bots that give people what they want to hear, or they are there to do a psychological profile on them and then work on them and their weaknesses, their strengths, their interests, their dislikes. All of those things can be worked on using AI bots. And people are turning into AI bots on the X platform. You'll see all of these big, influencers, and really you can tell the shills right off the bat. They're the ones saying it's the Democrats, or they're the ones saying it's the Republicans. Anyone who thinks the main problem in all of the world is one political party or the other is obviously working in some level with the opposite party, in my opinion. This is just a good way to find out who's a shill, because obviously if they're simply promoting purely political party as the solution to everything, vote for our candidate and we'll solve everything, obviously they're not authentic people. They are activists within the lobbying of those political parties. So that's what I wanted to talk with you guys about today. Do you think... I want to know your thoughts, though. I really want to know your thoughts on this case. Do you think it's the same guy? Do you think this guy, the actual person who carried out this violent act, do you think this guy is the same as this guy? Do you think this guy is the same as this guy? Do you think this guy is the same as this guy? Personally, I believe this guy is the same as this guy, but I do not believe this guy is this guy at all. I do not at all. And you can see differences in, some are saying differences in his chin. It's possible that it's him, but was he working with someone else? I think he's innocent until he's proven guilty, as is the case and as should always be the case. But with problems like facial recognition being used and businesses sharing that video feed to facial recognition companies, and then countless illegal arrests and wrongful arrests that are used with a full face scan, full biometric scan. In this case, they only have partial, and yet they're saying it's a match. I don't buy it. And then we have parallel construction. The fact is, this compromises the entire justice system and fairness, and it should be ended. They really need to follow, the guidelines, follow the law, just like everyone who is charged should be following the law. So should law enforcement. They should be following the law. If anyone, they should be held to a higher standard. And parallel construction completely compromises the justice system, in my opinion. So let me know what you think. Do you think this is the same guy, all the same guy, or not? I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. If you want to support this channel, you can go to bmc.link/politictech. There's plenty of options there, from Bitcoin to Monero to Cash App to buying a coffee or even supporting monthly with a membership. And I really want to thank all those who have subscribed to a monthly membership. Really means a lot. I'm going to be doing some other videos off the cuff, some things I may not want to necessarily say in public videos. So if you want some of the behind the scenes stuff, if you subscribe as a member, it's only $5 a month, and I try to share extra info and thoughts as they come to me. Thank you guys so much for your support. Let me know in your thoughts in the comments on this. I really, in particular, want to know what you think about this. As someone who is an illustrator and who has done thousands of hours of various perspectives, from one angle to another, I don't think this guy is the other guys. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll be back later with more on how to protect your security and privacy.